Hello, everyone. Welcome to yet another exciting session of Baiju Social Science classes. So, as you know, we had put out the first chapter of civics for you last week, which was the Indian Constitution. I hope that you have gone through it. In fact, I would like to see a thumbs up from you in the comment section below if you have gone through this session of ours. Right? In fact, it's a very important session to study because today we're actually going to be moving on to the second chapter in civics, which is a linked chapter. And in this chapter, we will together explore an interesting feature of our constitution. What are we going to study today? Well, yes, we are going to be talking and studying about secularism. So let's get started. But before that, let us quickly have a recap of what we studied in our last session, right? So, in our last session, we learned about the key features of the Indian Constitution, which were, yes, number one, federalism, number two, parliamentary form of government, number three, separation of powers, number four, fundamental rights, and number five, secularism, right? We went through all of these in detail, in fact, and in terms of fundamental rights, we know that we even looked into the 6 fundamental rights that our constitution gives us. So, keeping this in mind, today we will be in this brand new session of ours. We will be talking and learning more about the key feature of secularism. Right, so in terms of secularism, we will be talking about the definition of secularism. We will be talking about the importance of secularism, and we will be talking about what exactly is Indian secularism. So, what is secularism? Well, we saw in the previous session that secularism refers to the separation of what? Let me put this down for you. Separation of religion from the state. We learned about this last time, right? So, a secular state is one that does not officially promote any one religion or have it as a state religion, right? Now, our Indian constitution declares that India is a secular state. But what does this imply for us, the citizens of India? So, this means that the Indian citizens have the freedom to live by their own religious beliefs and practices without any interference from the state. Right? So, now that we have understood the meaning of secularism, let us try to understand why secularism is so important. Now, this is very important because practicing secularism is very important for a country so that it can function democratically. See, most countries in the world, we know they have people from multiple religions. Now, usually within these diverse religions, there will probably generally always be one religious group that will be the majority, right? And now think about it. If this dominant religious group has access to state power, then there is probably a high chance that they can misuse their power and financial resources to discriminate against other religious groups, right? So this can result in what? This can result in discrimination as well as coercion, which basically means force. And this, what happens with this? Well, obviously, this leads to the violation of the fundamental rights of all the citizens of a democratic country, right? So that is exactly why India, as a secular state, separates state and religion. And this decision of the Indian state prevents the tyranny of the majority, right? So it is meant as an act of protection. And not just that, by adopting secularism, all religious communities will be considered equal, right? All religious communities will be equal no matter what religion one belongs to, right? So this means that all the citizens will have the freedom to accept any religion of their choice as well as preach their religious teachings, right? No interference at all. They will also have the freedom to interpret their religious beliefs the way they want. That's cool, right? Okay, now let's talk about secularism in India. Now, in India, our constitution lays down three important mandates for the country to practice its secularism, right? So, what are these three important mandates? The first rule is that no religious community will dominate another religious community. They should respect people from other religions and give them the freedom to practice their religion completely and freely the way they want, right? Then, the second rule is that members of the same religion should not dominate other members of the same community. What does this mean? Well, this means that every citizen of the country has the freedom to practice and interpret their religion differently and the way they want, right? And finally, thirdly, the state does not enforce any religion and cannot take away the religious freedom of individuals, right? So these are the three rules, and these rules ensure that India remains a democratic country and that the fundamental rights of the citizens are not violated, and this is very, very important, right? Okay, so now that we have understood the concept of secularism in India, let's take a look at how it is practiced in India, right? So there are basically three ways that the state practices secularism in India. It is number one, the strategy of distancing, number two, the strategy of non-interference, and number three, the strategy of intervention. So we will be covering each of these in detail so that you understand what these stand for, right? So first, let's take a look at the strategy of distancing. The strategy of distancing means that the Indian state is neither ruled by a religious group nor does it support any religion. So it is neutral in that sense. What has the state done? The state has it has distanced itself from adopting a state religion. So for example, let me give you an example for this. Supposing you have a government school, okay? Now this government school cannot promote any one religion in their morning prayers or even through their religious celebrations. Why? Because if the government allows the celebration of one religious festival, it would be a violation of their policy of treating all other religions equally, right? So in that sense, this is the strategy of distancing, right? So this is the first one. Let's move on and understand the strategy of non-interference, which is the second strategy, right? Now, in this method of practicing secularism, the state, in order to respect the sentiments of all religions, chooses not to interfere with any religious practices. And this will help in preventing the domination of one religion over the other, right? But it is important to note over here that the state does make certain exceptions for particular religious communities so that they can respect their religious sentiments. Okay, let me give you an example. Now, we know that motorcyclists wearing helmets in India is the rule, right? Everybody has to wear it. But Section 129 of the Indian Motor Vehicles Act of 1988 exempts a Sikh person who wears a turban, that it is not necessary basically that he has to wear a helmet, even though it is a rule. Why? And he will not even be fined for doing the same, right? So what is the state in this case doing? The state in this case chose not to introduce the law for Sikhs, as it would have seemed like an interference or an intervention in the matters of their religious beliefs and patterns. So in that sense, this is the strategy of non-interference with their religious practices, right? Right. So this is the second strategy. This was an example so that you could understand it. But this is basically what it is. It will not interfere in the religious practices or the beliefs of the people. Right? Then, the last strategy is the strategy of intervention. Now, what does this strategy mean? So, in this case, the state can interfere in religious practices if it violates the fundamental rights of the citizens of the country. Okay, let's understand this better. Let us take the practice of untouchability as an example. Okay. Now we know that this practice discriminated against those people who were classified as belonging to the lower caste. They were known as untouchables, right? So the state in such a case had to interfere, had to intervene to prevent such religion-based exclusion and discrimination. Why? Because obviously it violates the fundamental right of equality for the people who were classified as untouchables, right? So in this case, intervention is practiced, right? Now, another very important thing to keep in mind over here is that intervention from the state can also be in the form of financial or other aid to start schools or to start educational institutions, and such kind of support will definitely help in the progress of minority religions in the country. So in this sense, while we do practice non-interference, the state can intervene to protect the citizens, right, from their fundamental rights and to help them, right? Okay, so now that we saw how Indian secularism functions, let me ask you a question. How is Indian secularism different from the secularism of other democratic countries? Okay, let's understand this with the example. Let's talk about the example of the US. Now, in the case of the US, the Constitution prevents the state from making any laws regarding religions, and they practice a strict separation of religion from the state, right? So there's a strict separation between state and religion. Now, what does this mean exactly? This means that the state does not interfere in the religious affairs at all. No conditions, no exceptions, right? But if you think of the way that secularism is practiced in India, this is quite different from that of the US. In India, the state can intervene in religious affairs if they violate the ideals laid out in the Constitution, or if they feel that the fundamental rights of citizens are being affected. So, for instance, we saw previously that the state intervenes to prevent untouchability in religions, because this obviously violates the fundamental rights of the citizens. So, you see, in this case, it can intervene, whereas in the US, they don't intervene at all. They do not interfere at all, right? However, now, we do need to keep in mind that in Indian secularism, though the state is not strictly separate from religion, it does definitely maintain a principled distance from it, right? So this means what? This means that the state intervenes only if various religious practices violate the fundamental rights of its citizens. Otherwise, it distances itself. Okay? All right. So with this, we have actually come to the end of a very, very interesting chapter. Let us quickly recap what we've learned in today's session. We understood more about what secularism is, right? We spoke about the separation of religion from state. We then went ahead and understood the importance of secularism, and then we went and spoke more about Indian secularism, which is we spoke about the concept and we spoke about how it is practiced in India. We spoke about the 3 strategies, right? Now, in case you have any sort of doubts, please do not hesitate to let me know in the comment section below, and we will try our best to answer these doubts for you. Now, before I actually end this session, I have a question for you as always. What is the question? Ta-da! Okay, you can't see the question. Let me delete the lines over here. The question is, will the Indian government intervene if some religious groups say that their religion allows them to practice infanticide? What do you think? Well, you can let me know your answers to this question in the comment section below. And for more such sessions, definitely tune in to our Byju's 6 to 8 channel. And definitely do not forget to like, share and subscribe to our channel. I'm going to see you really soon. Bye-bye.